Well, good morning. I hope this first Sunday in November is off to a good start for you. Today we're going to learn something about a place that celebrates UP history. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Now here's your host, Don Ryan.
The UP Heritage Center has moved around the campus of Northern Michigan University since its inception, but it now has a new permanent home as part of the Beaumier Heritage Center. The person who has been responsible for developing the center is Daniel Truckee, and he is here with us this morning to give us some insights into what the center is and what it has to offer. Welcome, Dan, to the Ryan Report.
Oh, thanks, Don. I really appreciate it.
Good to have you with us.
Yeah.
Let's get our audience a chance to get to know you a little bit first. You're a Marquette native?
No, actually, my dad was a Marquette
native. Dad was a Marquette native.
Yeah, he grew up on Bluff Street.
Okay.
His dad and his dad as well. So
okay.
My family has really strong roots in Marquette, but no, we lived all over the state of Michigan,
okay.
but also in the UP. I graduated from Munising High School. And
oh, really?
Went to high school in Wakefield as well, in the western UP. But then I went to Northern, and when I had a chance to come back 9 years ago, I decided to do so.
You also did some other studies at Bowling Green and some things beyond your bachelor's degree?
Yeah, I went to Bowling Green State to study popular culture for 2 years. I got my master's in popular culture, and then went to the Cooperstown graduate program in upstate New York for museum studies.
Okay.
And that led me on the museum trail.
You know, I saw a quote from you that said you originally planned to go to Northern in political science with the hope of becoming a lawyer and maybe getting into politics, but decided later that you found the history of politics more interesting than the process itself?
Exactly true. That's exactly true. When I came back to Northern to work, Dave Carlson was still teaching in the poli-sci department, and I told him, you were the reason I left poli-sci to be a history major. I said, not because your class wasn't great or you weren't great, but because I learned in your class that I really loved studying the history of it, but the practice of politics wasn't something that I really wanted to get involved in at that time. And even today, I don't think
you probably haven't changed your mind.
No, I more love the history of it. That's the nature of being a historian.
You also serve on the board of FinFest USA.
I do, yes.
Yeah. What's coming up in that area?
Well, we are just in the process of planning the 2017 festival, which is going to be in Minneapolis next, I think, September. It's part of all sorts of activities going into Minneapolis with the centennial of Finland's independence. So we're cranking that up right now. Actually, we're meeting next month to get the planning started for 2017.
And on the personal side, you're also a singer, folk singer, songwriter.
I am. I've been doing that for longer than I've been a museum professional, that's for sure.
You get to work any of your songs into any of your presentations?
You know, I've actually had a chance to do that on occasion. And in fact, that's one of the great things about my job, is I've been able to work in my love of music into what I've done over the years, but in particular at the Beaumier Center, because we see the history and culture of the UP as being the key to what we do, and music is a big part of that. So.
Yeah, and you also had some other experiences. You've been in Traverse City, you've been in Connecticut, you've worked in this field before returning to Marquette.
Absolutely. I went all over after I finished school in New York State. I stayed there, worked, and I went to Connecticut and also Iowa. I was in Iowa for a few years and then came back to Michigan. My wife and I really missed the Great Lakes and our home state. She was born and raised in the UP, so it was for us to come back here was really it was a dream come true, really.
And besides serving as the director and curator of the Heritage Center, you do teach some classes at Northern?
I do. I teach museum studies. In fact, I'm teaching it this coming winter semester for the history department, and then I teach Upper Peninsula folklore in the sociology, anthropology program. I haven't taught that in a few years, but I have taught that in the past. That's a great class as well.
So with all of your history and your interest, this really has to be your dream job after.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I get to do so many different kinds of things, exhibitions, public programs, and also be involved in a lot of things, both community-wide and Upper Peninsula-wide, which is part of what the Beaumier Center is about. We are a UP-wide organization, and that's what our mission is serving the Upper Peninsula but also preserving the UP as well and its history and culture.
How did it come to be in the first place? How did Northern come to establish this center?
You know, that's a great question, because it goes a lot further back than people know. We received the donation from Dr. Beaumier in 2004 to start the center.
Oh, really?
But actually, Northern, as early as the 1960s, was talking about creating an Upper Peninsula museum on campus. You may remember Dr. Odell, who taught in the history department. It was one of his dreams. And one of his mentees at the time was Dr. Russ Minyagi, who, of course, taught for many, many years at Northern, retired a couple years ago. And Russ kind of carried that dream with him a long time at Northern. Maybe someday we'll be able to create a museum like this. And he was instrumental in creating the displays at the Superior Dome, which, with his wife Diane Kordich, which they thought was kind of a stepping stone to creating something more permanent. And that finally happened when Dr. Beaumier made the donation. So it took a long time. Museums are like that, you know, it doesn't happen right away. But it's really been quite a journey. In fact, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary in December. So.
And you were actually in the Cohotes building for a time too, weren't you?
We were in the Cohotes building on the first floor, and which was, it was kind of an interesting place to be, because on one hand, it's when you see the building, you don't think museum or this is a welcoming place to go visit. But at the other hand, it was a great place because it helped people at the university know that we existed. Because for a long time, people were like, what is this Beaumier Center? Right. And the Cohotes building being there, and everybody uses that building, we just became something that people knew about. And but now our new location is much better, and it's going to help the community a lot more.
Okay. We'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the show after we take this break. Our guest this morning is Dan Truckee. We're learning more about the Beaumier UP Heritage Center on the campus of Northern Michigan University. In fact, you know, we have some video, just a short video clip. This, Dan, this shows really part of the current display, and we'll come back and talk more about that. But this is the kind of thing people can see when they stop at the center?
Yeah, we have a gallery with changing exhibits. We don't have a permanent gallery like some museums. Instead, we change our main gallery every 4 to 6 months, depending on the exhibit. And they always deal with some subject of Upper Peninsula history and culture. Which is actually why we're a heritage center versus a history museum. Okay. Because we see heritage as a living thing, living culture. So we are trying to show not only the history of the UP, but also those aspects of UP culture that are still alive and thriving today, and also aspects of how history connects with the present and how there's similarities between the two. So.
And I would say people, you know, can go there and, you know, they can walk through this in 20 or 30 minutes, but you could also spend the day there.
Oh yeah, with this new exhibit you could, and some of our exhibits are like that, in that we try to give people a lot to look at and encourage them to come back and spend more time when they have that, and bring family and friends which has been the case with our current exhibits. We've had really good attendance, and people have been coming in and bringing family members with them. And we also have displays on Northern history and artifacts, because it is also the Alumni Welcome Center for the university. Okay. So we want to have things for alumni and people just visiting the university to know more about Northern's history and some of the things related to that. So.
Now some people might say, well, we have a lot of museums around the UP. You know, what's different about this?
I think the main thing that's different about our museum is that we deal with the Upper Peninsula entirely. Okay. And so an exhibit like the one we have right now, we're focusing on communities all over the UP in this exhibit. And a lot of our exhibits, or most of them, are in the same way. I mean, sometimes they'll be about a specific place or subject, but we try to bring in the entire Upper Peninsula in our exhibits, and also our programming. We feel our public programming is just as important as our exhibits, because our mission is more than just to put things on display for people to see. So we're always trying to do things throughout the UP. We engage historical societies and historians and community members all over the UP in what we do.
And you'd mentioned it earlier, I think, you're thinking about festivals and concerts and various kinds of activities as part of the center.
Absolutely. I recently was kind of going through trying to figure out what are all the types of events that we've done, and we've put on just about any kind of heritage event you can imagine, from how to make felt workshops to Native American craft workshops, music, theater, literature, celebrating certain events such as the Kalevala Day in February, which I don't think anybody does that besides us. Okay. And we also did a Valentine's Day dance in Ishpeming with this group from Italy. So, I mean, we're always kind of every year trying to find new types of events rather than repeat the same thing every year. Though we do find ourselves going back to certain things just because they're popular and people enjoy them, but we always like to keep it fresh and do new things, because there's always new ways to look at history and culture and the UP in general.
Let's talk a little bit about this exhibit. It's called Ghost Towns or Remnants, Ghost Towns of Upper Michigan.
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, well, actually, it came from Michael Lokinen, the sociologist on campus who's also the filmmaker, who's made many documentaries about the UP. Right. He was working on his documentary about Winona, the ghost town in Houghton County. And he decided, while he was working on that film, I was kind of a consultant for him on that project. And he's also on my exhibition committee for the center. And he said, well, you should do an exhibit about ghost towns. And the committee discussed it. We came up with some ideas, and then we ran with it. And so that's really how it began, was from his work, and then he premiered that film last year. We were involved in the premiere of the film, and then since then we started working on it, and it was really this past summer that we jumped in head first into the project and finished it up.
How long does it take to put a display like that together?
Well, it can take a year or more, depending on how complicated it is, but this one took about 5 months, but it was 5 months of steady work on it. Because I had to travel to each site and to do photography and also drone footage of each site. Okay. And so that took a lot of time, but also the research and collecting all the images and the writing and everything. So it was a full staff activity. My student assistants assisted me with putting it together, and I did a lot of the travel.
We'll talk a little more specifically about it in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take one more break. Again, we're talking about the Beaumere UP Heritage Center at Northern Michigan University with the director-curator, Dan Truckee. We were talking about the current exhibit, Ghost Towns of the UP. There are 15 different little towns here.
Absolutely.
Talk about how they were picked out.
Well, that's a really good question, because there are so many communities that could have been part of this, and we knew that when we started. So we decided to narrow it down first by selecting only one from each county of the UP. Okay. And that really helped, because then we could narrow it down in certain areas of these towns, and then also kind of figure out what is a ghost town. And there isn't a technical definition, though. A lot of historians say that it's a town that had a post office and no longer does have a post office. Okay. And I think that's a little too simplistic. I think it has more to do with, one, what was the town created for? How was it created? And is that still an active thing, such as there was a mine or a lumber mill or a quarry? And if that is no longer the reason that people live there, and there is just a remnant community there, then that could qualify as a ghost town. So we were trying to find communities that fit that bill, but also ones that had different stories about the UP and how the UP developed. In the end, many of them were related to the mining and the lumber and railroad industries and quarry industries. So there were similarities, but each one had its own kind of distinct story of its kind of rise and then fall as a community. And they were all boom towns of some type that really only had one reason to exist. And then when that reason, ended, either the resource was gone or the industry just couldn't support it anymore, then the town kind of went with it.
And in some cases, there are pieces of a town left. In other cases, there's not much left, I would say. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, like Tula in Gogebic County, there's nothing really left there. There are no standing structures in Tula.
Okay.
What there are some foundations, and if you walk around in the woods, you find scattered remnants of buildings and possessions that people had in the community. We found this old car, you know, out in the middle of the woods. Right. And that's part of the reason we call it the exhibit remnants, because that's, in most cases, what is there is just remnants of a community that once thrived there. And some of them do have a lot more. You know, a place like Fayette, which is actually a historic site,
right.
There's still a lot there. And then others such as Dollarville and Luce County, there's still people living in Dollarville, but none of the business or industry that brought people there originally is still active. So it's more of a bedroom community for Newberry now than an actual town. And that's another thing, is that ghost towns are places, they don't have stores, they don't have restaurants,
right.
They don't have any services as a town anymore. They're just a place that might have some people living there, but most of the town actually is empty or has fallen away or has been abandoned.
Talking about Dr. Miyagi, I can recall discussing with him the culture of the UP, but him pointing out that the other thing we have going for us is we have our own unique piece of geography, which is kind of interesting. You know, that the UP is the UP. I mean, it's visible on a map, and you know, it's a special place.
I always tell people, because sometimes people will write Upper Peninsula and they won't capitalize it, and I'll say, no, it's supposed to be capitalized. I'm like, well, it's not a state, or it's not, no, but it's a geographic form and an actual place, so you capitalize Upper Peninsula. It's not a directional thing. It is an actual place, and it is a unique thing, and our geography in general is unique because of the the Canadian Shield coming up here, and it's a fascinating place, which is why it was developed. You know, for mining, for lumbering. Right. You know, it's what brought so many people here in that big boom in the late 19th, early 20th century. I would say it's also the reason that people stayed, because it's a beautiful place and a fascinating place.
We should point out a couple of things quickly. We have probably less than a minute, but admission is free.
Yes.
You're right at the corner where the DeVos Art Museum and the Hedgecock and the Forrest Roberts Theater, so it's kind of easy to find.
Yeah, we're a part of a cultural core here on campus.
You're open pretty good hours, but people can find them on the internet if they want to.
Yeah, we're open every day except Sunday, and most of the days. But they can get our hours on our website.
And when will this exhibit end?
This one ends mid-January, and then we'll be opening an exhibit on World War I in the Upper Peninsula at the end of January, and that's part of a community-wide event with the Marquette Regional History Center and historical societies all over the Marquette County. Okay. So it's going to be a big thing next year.
Well, it's a fascinating place, and I'm glad you came in this morning to share some information about it.
Well, thank you, Don. Thanks for asking me to come. It was my pleasure.
Okay. We'll get back with some other thoughts after we take this break. I don't want to sound like someone who's just getting older and against change in general. I work hard at staying current and up to date. I have my iPhone, I text, I use TiVo at home. I like the new technology that comes in cars today. But I'm not always happy when change occurs. Recently, one of the banks I use changed their customer website. They're obviously very proud of it from the announcements they made, but I asked why. The one they had worked fine. I knew where to find everything I needed. I had no problems with the way it was before. But somebody decided they should change the entire look and layout. As far as I can see, they didn't add any new features or take anything away. It's just that now everything looks different and it's in a new location. I have to learn all over again how to navigate it. It's change I didn't need. And while I'm on the subject of things that annoy me, let me ask this question. Why can't car manufacturers standardize how things operate? Like most of you, I unlock my car with a key fob. The problem is we have two cars, both manufactured by the same corporation, and the process of locking and unlocking the doors is opposite for each of them. For one car, the unlock button is on the upper left, and the lock is on the upper right. For the other car, it's just the opposite. Needless to say, all too often I find myself locking the door when I want to unlock it and vice versa. I mean, I eventually get it right, but it shouldn't have to be that way. Why don't they standardize something as simple as that? And there are many other examples on cars. And here's a story I'm kind of embarrassed to tell, but I was driving to work just the other morning while it was still dark. Suddenly, without knowing exactly what I did, and whatever that was, it was accidental, the headlights on my new car went out while I was driving down the highway. I panicked trying to figure out how to get them back on and realized I had no idea how to do that. Cars today, mine included, come with the option of automatic headlights. They turn on and off by themselves as long as the switch is in the right position. So it's not like you do it every day. You set it once and forget about it. At least that's what I did, because at that moment I had no idea which button or lever on my car turned the headlights on or where it was located. I turned off the highway, pulled into a parking lot so I could try to figure it out, and managed to get the lights back on. It took a moment or two, but I finally did it. As I said, the whole episode is kind of embarrassing. Thinking about these things, though, brings me back to the good old days. I think that many of you are old enough to remember when they actually wrote the name of the device on the button that turned it on and off. We had buttons marked headlights or heater, defroster, radio, or whatever. Today we have symbols designed to tell us what those buttons are for. But with all the devices we have in cars today, some of those symbols aren't always easy to figure out, especially when you're driving down the highway in the dark and your headlights go out. Yeah, change is good, but for me, some things were better the way they used to be. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, it's time for us to make way for the Today Show, which is coming up next. Remember to keep up to date on the latest news. The place to go is uppermichigansource.com. You can also catch this show at that same address. The latest edition is usually available starting on Monday afternoon. Thanks to Dan Truckee for joining us this morning to help us learn more about the Beaumere UP Heritage Center at NMU. If you get a chance, stop in and check it out. Thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you again next Sunday morning.